All right, friends, we're talking about the big day. Step 8 is the closing, the day you've been waiting for, the day you've been working towards for probably the last couple months, at least, if not longer. And we're going to be here very soon. So it's time to walk through the closing, make sure you understand exactly what's going to happen and all the things that you need to have prepared so that the closing goes smoothly. But of course, let's first start with the master checklist. We got that appraisal. That was good. At this point, we're finalizing the mortgage. That should be done by the time we get to closing day. And we're here. We're ready to make it happen. So what will you learn in this video? You'll get the inside scoop on the title company, kind of a new player in the process, but an important player. And what is the closing disclosure? Most important document that you will sign at closing. You want to understand it actually before closing, and we'll talk about that in just a second. And how does the closing go? I'll kind of walk you through what you should expect and how it should go. So let's get right to it. Oh wait, let's go with a fun fact. Most of the time the seller isn't even at the closing. I've been to home purchases where the seller was at the closing and home purchases where the seller wasn't at the closing. Most of the time the seller has already signed all the documents that they have to sign before your closing. So don't be surprised if the seller isn't there. Having said that, sometimes they are there. So don't be surprised if you're sitting across the table from someone you really haven't met, and yet you've been doing all this negotiating with, you made back and forths with your realtors and stuff like that. So be prepared for either. The seller often isn't there, but if they're sitting across from the table from you, no problem, because you're going to be well prepared. So what is a closing? Well, it's the last step in the home buying process. It's when you actually purchase the house. It's a meeting that you go to, sign lots of papers, spend a few bucks, and walk out with a set of keys. It's the spot you go to, the experience you have buying your house. Let's talk about what is a title company. You probably hear about the title company when your realtor tells you where the closing is going to take place. Most of the time, closings happen at the title company, but there's actually a lot more to them than just the location. The title company does a lot of stuff. Their primary responsibility is to make sure that the sale is legal in all sorts of different ways. They want to make sure that the house is, actually owned by the person that says it's owned, that they get the deed transferred from the seller, the other person, to the buyer, you. And so they're responsible for really the inner workings of the transfer of ownership from one person to another, the property that you're purchasing. And the title company does a lot of that stuff in the background. So, that means they check titles and ownership and property of any liens, problems, or anything like that. They're making sure that all this real estate transfer of ownership stuff is going to go perfectly smoothly. Generally, they also do the following. They move all the money involved in the deal. So your mortgage company is going to send money into the situation, the sale price, and then that's going to go back out to the seller. Or if the seller has a mortgage on the property, then it's going to go to the mortgage company. They're going to get the extra. There's all sorts of money moving around, making sure that all the dollars that exchange hands for the appraiser and the inspector and all those things that happened through the closing process, they're going to get paid, and the title company is going to take care of making sure those checks move around. So they move all the money involved and make sure it gets there. They organize the closing documents, so the mortgage company will send a lot of their documents to the title company, and the title company will have those ready when you get there for closing. They also put together the stuff that's all about the deed, which is the property ownership document that shows that the seller is the owner, and then will show that you are the owner after this process has happened. So the title company takes care of all this stuff. Let's talk about a document. We went from a business, the title company, to a document. The closing disclosure, it may have some other names. It's changed names over the years. Closing disclosure is the most common name for it, and it is the document, simply put, that shows all of the money that is changing hands. It shows all the different things that money is going to go towards. You're going to be, your mortgage is going to be on there. All the appraisal and the inspector and the insurance and the, things they put in, the down payment, all this stuff is going to be on this document. It's each going to be on a line item there. So it's laid out like a ledger. And you're going to be able to see all the costs that are happening on your side. If anything's coming in on your side, that's going to be there. What's going out to the seller, all that kind of stuff is on this closing disclosure. So if you're a numbers nerd and you just really love numbers like me, then you really like documents like this. If you don't, though, if you're not a numbers person, you really want to make sure that you take the time to understand this. And my suggestion is that within 1 or 2 days before the closing, so maybe the day before the closing or a couple of days before the closing, you make an appointment to sit down with your lender who will have this document and go over line by line all the things that are on there. So if you have questions about those things, you're not in the pressure situation of being at the closing when you're asking them. You're asking them just between you and your lender the day before, so there isn't any confusion. You want to understand what you're going into when you go into the closing, especially if the seller's sitting across from the table. It's just kind of like a little bit of an uncomfortable situation. There's all these documents flying around. This document is the most important one. Don't wait till the closing. Look at it beforehand. Sit down with your lender. If your lender isn't willing to do that, make them. They should be willing to do that, whether that's, over the phone if it's an online type of thing, or sitting down with a person if they're local. So make sure that you have that. And like I said before, understanding that for the first time at closing can cause mistakes and even stop the closing from happening, because you are realizing something right there at the closing that maybe you don't understand or you weren't ready for, weren't prepared for. And, it can be uncomfortable. So don't make it uncomfortable. Just go ahead and meet with your lender prior to the closing so that you really can ask all your questions and understand that closing disclosure. Okay, so let's talk about the closing day. And I created one last checklist for you. This kind of breaks down 3 different things. First one, we kind of already talked about, things that you should do before, and then we'll talk about what to bring to the closing, and finally the documents you'll sign. That's on page 38 in your workbook, but I'll also go over it right here. So first, what to do the day before. So I talked about going over the closing disclosure with your lender. I think that's a super important thing to do. You may be able to do it a few days before. You certainly don't want to do it 2 weeks before, because things can change. Your lender should have everything set up within 2 days of the actual closing, and so they should be able to go over that closing disclosure with you. You may want to verify insurance. You can probably do that while you're sitting down with your lender. Just say, hey, I just wanted to make sure you've got the certificate of insurance. Everything is good on the insurance side, so you should be able to verify that. And then finally, verify all seller contingencies are complete. What I mean by that is if you ask the seller to do something before the closing day, put a new roof on the house or do whatever, then you want to make sure that is taken care of. You don't want to sign documents at closing if that seller didn't do what they were supposed to do. So whatever agreement you set up with the seller, the day before, you want to make sure those contingencies have been dealt with to your satisfaction before you walk into that closing and sign those papers. So those are 3 things that you should do before the closing day. What should you bring to the closing? Well, if you're going to be paying any money as a part of the down payment or any of those kinds of things, then you should bring a certified or cashier's check. Do not bring a personal check. They won't accept it. You want to bring a certified or cashier's check for the amount of money. Again, you can verify that when you sit down with your lender the day before and look over the closing disclosure, making sure that you know what you're supposed to bring, and make sure to bring that. You should have a photo ID on you. It would be embarrassing to not have your photo ID. They ask for it. You got to drive home, all that kind of stuff. Just make sure you have your ID on you. And finally, any other items required by your lender. Again, that meeting the day before, ask your lender, is there anything else I need to bring? And if there's anything else you are supposed to bring, make sure you have that when you walk into the door on the closing day. And finally, this is an important one. So a list of people to call if necessary. Generally, everything's going to be fine, no issues. But if you have advisors that can't be there, so if your realtor isn't going to be able to be there, for example, or if your mom or dad has been your advisor and you trust them, they have answers to a lot of questions, you want to, maybe even a lawyer, if you have a lawyer and you wanted to have them on a list. It is possible when you're in the closing that you'll have a major question. Not very common, but sometimes you do. And if you have a major question during the closing, you want to know right off, how do I call that person? Maybe even tell them ahead of time, hey, I'm going into my closing. It's going to be from 1 o'clock to 2 o'clock on Friday. Can you keep your phone available just in case I have a question for you? And so if you have that list right there, then it just takes the stress away. If you've got to call your lawyer, if you've got to call your dad and ask him a question, if you've got to call your realtor and make sure something is right that you're just not sure about, you can do that quickly and easily. So those are the things that you should bring to your closing. What's going to happen at the closing? So how's this going to work? Well, you'll arrive at the title company. That's generally where closings happen. Can they happen other places? Sure, absolutely. But almost always you're going to arrive at the title company. You're going to sign a lot of documents. You're going to sign all these documents. They're going to make you sign with your full name, with your middle initial, all this kind of stuff. Very formal. You're going to sign a lot of documents, and then you'll walk out with a huge stack of papers and a set of keys. It's going to be a good feeling. It's going to be a great feeling. And so that's kind of how it ends. So that's the process in a nutshell, but let's dig in just a little bit deeper. So what are all these documents that you're going to be signing? They basically break down into two different parts. One is that your real estate is changing ownership. The seller used to own it. Now you're going to own it. And so you need to sign some documents that have to do with the change of ownership in real estate. And then the second group is going to have everything to do with your mortgage. You're getting a loan so that you can purchase this property, and you're going to sign some documents associated with that loan. So let's start with the real estate. The first one is the deed. And there's different names for all this stuff. So I'm using general names, but different states have different laws. There's really no way to really nail down those exact things. The deed has to do with the actual thing that shows you are the owner. So you're going to sign a document that basically says, I am the owner now, and the seller will sign that same document that says, I am no longer the owner. And so that will go to your county or your city, and they'll go ahead and switch those things around. The bill of sale simply says you purchased the property, signed by both people. And then the seller's affidavit, just a quick version, is essentially the seller saying, hey, all the stuff I said is true. The shape of the house, the way the deed is set up, all the things we've talked about over this period is true. And you sign that as well, saying I agree with that. So those are the three basic things that is the real estate side of the documents you're going to sign. Again, depends on your state and all those kinds of things, but generally that's what we see. So let's talk then about the mortgage documents. So the first one is the closing disclosure. You've already gone over it with your lender, so it's not a surprise. Anything on there you already understand. Don't have to dig too far into it, but if you do have questions, ask them. Don't be afraid to slow the process down. If you have questions, could people get frustrated? I don't know. I guess if the seller's sitting there, could they feel like, oh man, I just want to be out of here? Who cares? You are buying a house. You're investing, making maybe the biggest investment you will ever make. Take your time. Make sure you understand things, even if you sat down with the lender yesterday. So go through that closing disclosure. Ultimately, you'll sign that and make sure that all is well there. The note and the mortgage are actually slightly different things. So the note is the lending note. So this is the mortgage company saying, hey, you're going to borrow X amount of money from us. You're agreeing to pay it back, all those kinds of things. And so you're going to sign that. That's called the note. And then the mortgage actually says, and you are going to use your house as collateral for this loan. So you've got this loan, that's the note, but if something goes wrong with this loan, something bad happens, you don't make your payments, whatever, you are going to give us the house. That's called collateral, where the bank gets something if you default on your loan. And so the note is about the loan itself. The mortgage is simply saying, hey, if I default on my loan, you get the house. So those are the basic mortgage documents. Again, there might be others. Those could have different names. It's hard for me to know exactly, but that gives you an overview of the types of documents that you're going to be signing. And finally, when you're done with it, you are going to celebrate. I'm dancing here in the studio for you. I'm so excited that you were able to purchase this house. I hope it brings you many, many years of wonderful memories, happy memories, sad memories, life-changing events, all the kinds of things that come with home ownership. I'm super proud of you for having gone through this process, walked through it, made it wonderful. I hope you had fun with it. That certainly was the intention with creating this new home buyer's guide. And here you are. Here you are. You got it. You did it. I'm proud of you. All right. Rookie mistake. The rookie mistake, and it's a huge rookie mistake, is trying to understand everything for the first time at closing. Obviously, if you watch this video, you're already ahead of the game. So you're not going to make that rookie mistake. I know you're not, but definitely go over that the closing disclosure with your lender prior. That's probably the biggest thing. The other stuff will all work itself out. So that's the rookie mistake. What did we learn in this video? We got the inside scoop on what is a title company, what is the closing disclosure, that super important document, and how does the closing go? So are you excited? I am. I think it's going to be awesome. We do have one more video. Yes, you already bought the house, but there is one more step, one more section in our course, and it's an important one. It's not one that you need to worry about right when you're closing, because oftentimes it doesn't happen until a couple months later. You want to celebrate right now. You want to start going out and looking at furniture or moving your stuff in, moving it out of your parents' garage or whatever the situation is. But at some point, we're going to have to address the monthly mortgage payment. And I certainly want to explain that to you because I want you to understand it well. So in step 9, we'll talk about the monthly mortgage payment and really break that down for you so you understand exactly how it works. All right. Last thing, I want you to head over to the Facebook group and share how you're feeling. I would love to see a picture of your new house on that Facebook page. If you've been going there regularly and chatting with us, being a part of the community, we want to know the house you've purchased. We want to see it maybe with you standing on the front porch or you standing with the keys outside of the title company, whatever it is. Share with us on that page what was surprising, confusing, and what you wonder, and also just what you're celebrating at this point. We are over there, and we're ready to answer your questions, and we're ready to celebrate with you. Well, that was the end of step 8. Super excited about your closing, and really, really proud of you, truly. So until the next time over at step 9 with the monthly mortgage payment, have a wonderful day.